The United States Constitution, for all of you out there that yell, "I'm a constitutionalist," when it's convenient only, does not allow and actually forbids any mechanism for the Supreme Court to overturn us firing the president and vice president. Presidential election cannot be given to the loser of an election. It doesn't matter if you like it, if you're a loser or not. Especially 7 months after an election, which is the timing that's being brought up here. George Washington took the first presidential oath April 30th, 1789. Things were different back then. A lot longer for an election to be finalized, getting all the votes done, waiting for everybody to bitch and moan about it. Each state using slightly different methods, potentially. We also had more than one system in the past that we don't have anymore, including that the first and second winners would be president and vice president, which means two people who could have been calling each other filthy names and doing every political dirty trick that was commonly available in the 1700s and even today might have to be strange bedfellows, encouraging coup d'etat or freaking literal duels and shooting of the president by the vice president. This was hammered out later on to where you couldn't do that. This also meant that the president and his cabinet could elect people in charge so that if you did manage to kill the president and the vice president, people that they put in place would be in the succession pathway or order of succession for the president, making it ridiculously a stupid idea to kill off a president, or just having them impeached or having them just harassed. But the oath was taken, and inauguration would happen in April. The U.S. Congress originally established March 4th as Inauguration Day to honor the date the government operations begun under the Constitution. That's totally what happened. This only had an exception if it fell on a Sunday, in which case it would happen on the 5th of March. Due to the controversy, however, of a compromise in 1877, Rutherford B. Hayes was sworn in on March 3rd, just before Ulysses S. Grant's term ended March 4th. Until a prescription was made, you could take the oath immediately afterwards because it's just an oath. But the inauguration was a ceremonial timing thing. But for 24 hours, the United States technically had two presidents at the same time for one day. The newly elected president was formally not allowed to be president until the end of the term for the other one. 1934, the Great Depression election had a 4-month stalemate caused when Hoover and Roosevelt were arguing for 4 months. The 20th Amendment in 1933 made the transition 10 weeks by moving it to January 20th, except when it falls on a Sunday, in which case it would be on the next day, the 21st. 1957, 1985, and 2013 are examples. When the inauguration ceremony and swearing of oath of office has been conducted, that's the end of it. Sometimes it's done without pomp, tradition, fanfare, or anything else, as is the example that's sometimes referred to as the secret swearing in, when it was just done as an agreement between them because it was such a close election and they wanted to prevent rebellion. Sounds familiar? 9 vice presidents ended up becoming president upon their predecessor's death or resignation during a term. This is the only time you can have this happen at a different time, at a later date, months after an election, and it is only to have a vice president take over for a president. That means that if you were able to remove Joe Biden from office for whatever reason, or if he was simply unable to perform his duties, it would just be Kamala Harris. Again, you do not reward the loser of an election that would be highly motivated to try to get rid of the president or vice president. This is intentional and noted by the Founding Fathers and the creators and framers of the Constitution to prevent attempted coup d'etats when parties argued. This is such a common theme in the past that obviously they had that in mind. No, there isn't a secret provision in the Constitution if you are a constitutionalist, you're not going to make up bullshit stories like that, that allows for removing someone because you don't like the outcome of an election because your side lost because Donald Trump is a loser. And no, there isn't a requirement of someone swearing on a Bible or anything else, just taking the oath and having an acknowledgement publicly in the inauguration to finalize any arguments. But more importantly, after the state's electors cast their votes in December by whatever method has been forced to exist by each state, which is what happened this time, Congress counts the votes and has no legal ability to ignore them. They can contest them, but they can't ignore them in January. A president is then sworn in after the fact. The only mechanism to remove them is through impeachment if Congress removes Biden for high crimes and misdemeanors committed while in office. Anything before you were in office cannot be used unless it is extremely pertinent, and it would have to be directly related. You cannot take Donald Trump out of office because he groped somebody when he was drunk when he was 19, for instance. You cannot do this to Biden either. You have to claim while he was in office. Now, you can't make it about the election itself. By definition, this excludes anything happening before, during, and involving the election, which is the reason that the election could not be used after Trump is sworn again to remove him from office, as was obviously stated by all the Republicans. The rules don't just apply to Republicans or Democrats because you like it that way. He has to be in office at the time as president to kick him out. Vice President Kamala Harris, again, would just then take over, and you'd be stuck with Kamala Harris. Now you have to get rid of her. If you do that, getting rid of the vice president, then who else has to take the oath in the secession or succession? All of them are Democrats. You have Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi, President pro tempore of the Senate Patrick Leahy, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Blinken is actually how it's pronounced, apparently. None of these individuals are excluded from this. You cannot claim that the entire election was rigged, frog's gay, and then have it be something anybody has to take serious for a simple reason. You have to produce overwhelming proof of this. And you have, what's her name, it will be biblical, talking about Che Guevara or whoever rigging an election, saying in court, I am not to be believed, I was bullshitting. She basically stated in court she lied to the public. And now she's saying the same shit. But where did this come from? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. The U.S. Constitution, in effect, through all of these layers, forbids any mechanism for a Supreme Court or any other group to overturn a presidential election at this point at all. Period, full stop. I'm not kidding about it. It's done that way to prevent anything you're seeing right now from working. The U.S. Constitution forbids it. The Supreme Court is excluded from this. Period. Even if you get a Pyrrhic victory where you get to claim that Georgia had miscounted a couple hundred votes and managed to get that put onto congressional record or whatever, which people have tried to do, it doesn't change whether or not that affects the outcome. Period. And again, these are certified by the states, some of which are now claiming that they wish to decertify because they now have new people in charge. During a presidential election, you do change out some of the people in your state in many cases. And when you do that, the incoming group might decide to overrule the previous decision that is absolute and unchangeable in their state that they certified an election. Again, that's done on purpose as well to make that not work. The whole point of this mechanism is to keep this kind of poor sportsmanship from winning. You don't let crybabies like Donald Trump and his ilk win. That also means you don't let Hillary Clinton win. She had more votes than Trump. Big deal. She lost due to the Electoral College. I don't like that. You can change those rules, but you have to work by them. And, fuck your feelings if you're a Republican and don't like it. I don't care. I didn't like Hillary either, but I didn't vote against her. I voted for her. Well, I didn't vote for her either. I voted against Trump. A lot of you didn't vote for anybody. You voted against something or somebody. An election loser like Donald Trump is especially forbidden because that's the entire point of it. It's a tacitly understood fact that once you lose an election, you're the last person in the secession list. They don't even have it on the list where the person who lost an election, whoever it was, it doesn't matter if you lost the election and you're the first loser, you're the first runner-up, that just means first loser, and that's Donald Trump. You're not allowed to demand that they take over. The people have spoken, and they did not choose Donald Trump. So the administration itself, with Nancy Pelosi and the whole stack, becomes the ones who take over next. You cannot swear in Donald Trump in August. It cannot be done because it's explicitly forbidden by the way our rules work. If you don't like it, get out of my fucking country, you traitor. The Supreme Court, in order to overturn all of this, would have to also ignore there's a bunch of evidence for QAnon as an organization, Donald Trump himself, and many of his compatriots trying to overturn and nullify an election through faked evidence, which is a high crime or misdemeanor, and is a valid reason to prevent someone from taking office, which is actually a listed thing. And you could technically demand that through Supreme Court. Donald Trump, if anything, brought through the Supreme Court, could be excluded by making a precedent of it. That's what the Supreme Court's really about, deciding hard cases. Sometime before March 30th, up into April 2021, Steve Bannon's War Room Pandemic had My Pillow Mike Lindell on. He said he will present the same refuted 3-hour propaganda movie info as evidence from months earlier to the Supreme Court so that they rule that the election was illegitimate somehow, and that somehow that means that they would have to go in on August to recertify Trump or something like that, even though that's excluded from being allowed in the U.S. Constitution. The Supreme Court is not allowed to do that. They're only allowed to exclude, the little details, which they've not allowed. Also, this idiot did not look up that that's during the June to September recess of the Supreme Court. They're not in session, and they're not going to be hearing any case like this. And again, you'd have to present evidence. The My Pillow guy, Trump, and every one of his cabal have failed to provide any evidence. And the evidence would have to satisfy, if you're not aware of it, if you don't fucking like this, you're going to hear this, the majority of people in the United States. You'd have to present evidence that would convince liberals that they were lied to about the outcome. Because that would also bring up the possibility that the original election that put Donald Trump in office could have also been rigged, which is something that most people actually accused him of being involved in. We do know that every country on this planet, but right now Russia and China are currently hacking our systems. This can actually be checked. I mean, you can look at, attack maps. This is really happening. And during the election 2016, this was also happening. In previous elections, people like me actually did help monitor the networks to see where the stresses were happening. We could see hacking going on in surges, and they were really weird. Not amateurish, but something was going on, and we still don't know exactly what happened. I don't approve of electronic ballots. I approve of mail-in ballots because it makes it really hard for someone to try to mug me while I'm trying to put a ballot in a box. No, they're not poll watchers. They're assholes trying to keep me from voting. And most of them had really, really unpleasant groin pain afterwards. They should have wore a cup. You're going to tackle me. I'm going to go for somewhere. So to conclude this, Steve Bannon's propaganda show, the My Pillow guy, Mike Lindell, and his propaganda work of 3 hours worth of crap he spent a couple of days building, none of this provided any proof that can be double-checked. Falsifiable data would mean that you can double-check it. This isn't falsifiable data. Most of it was rehashing the same old shit, and presenting this to the Supreme Court would mean that they were willing to listen to something they could just go look at on the internet. That's bullshit. It's been debunked to death. He has no new evidence. He always says he has new evidence. So does everybody else. Why do they keep doing this? Pretty simple reason. So that it keeps looking like they're doing something. They're looking busy. Look busy. Is it literally at all possible for Donald Trump to be put in office unless he launches an all-out war against the United States and tries to prevent any of us from being able to vote again? No. And the Republican Party is involved in trying to maintain their power hold by preventing people from voting overtly. And yes, the attack on the counting of the ballots that day by some of the people in the room in the Capitol building and people outside of it was a coup d'etat attempt, and it is not done by Antifa because they were trying to reinstate or forced to be instated Donald Trump, who lost an election. Again, the system is rigged against the loser winning. That isn't bad. That's the way it's supposed to be. Get over it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.